All right, so I'm kind of ashamed to say, but I kind of do this myself. But there's one thing that a lot of people don't do that they probably should do before they actually go to zero their rifle, and that is boresighting.
Sure.
Can you explain to the lovely people what boresighting is?
Sure. Boresighting, you're just trying to look down your barrel to see where it's pointed, trying to make sure that you make an initial adjustment on your scope to align that scope with your gun at a certain distance. So if we're zeroing our rifle at 100 yards, we're shooting this gun, all I'm gonna do is look down the barrel, point it at my target, make sure the gun is really stable. I'm just gonna use the same bipod and bags that I use from mounting. And look down my barrel. The bigger the caliber is, the shorter the barrel, it gets a little bit harder, but you can just move back further while you're looking down your barrel. The goal is just get your rifle nice and stable, look down your barrel, make an elevation, and then a windage adjustment.
So essentially you're taking your barrel, pointing it at the target that you're shooting at, and then you're marrying what you're seeing in your optic roughly with what you're seeing do your barrel.
Absolutely. So by the time you send that first round, you're nice and on paper and not just wondering where you're at.
So as this one genius put it, you know the guy you see when you're at the range and he's trying to zero his rifle and you see a box of empty ammo.
All the frustration.
Right? Yeah. And then that's usually as a result of not zeroing your gun.
Absolutely.
So if you want to save some money, save some rounds.
And then there's the safety aspect of it, right?
That too.
If you're going to a public range, we need to know where our projectiles are going, and sometimes throwing around in the dirt is not the answer.
Or throwing it over the
berm.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize that you can just throw an optic on there and not realize that optic is pointing above the berm, and you won't realize it because the movements are so small and incremental. And now you're sending rounds over the berm, which is why a lot of ranges almost have to, you need to test before you can actually zero your rifle on a long distance. So let's get to it, and then you just kind of show us how you actually boresight.
Before you finish watching this video, a word from our sponsor. Have you ever thought about making a living in the firearms industry? If you enjoy gun repair, ballistics, and learning about firearms, Sonoran Desert Institute's online courses might just be a good fit for you. To find out more, visit sdi.edu or call 480-999-4767 today. All the ammo used in this video was brought to you by Nosler, maker of the most innovative, most accurate, and most effective bullets and ammunition in the industry.
So we pulled apart the internals of the SCAR 20. What we have now is just the upper receiver. And so I've supported the front with the bipod, the rear with the bags. What I'm gonna do is start looking down my barrel and trying to get the center of my target in the center of my barrel. I want to have equal and even spacing as I'm looking down it. And we want to make sure that this is really nice and stable. So, okay, I'm pointed at my target. And what I'm going to do now is, without moving my rifle, I'm going to go ahead and look up into my scope. My reticle is aiming above where I was pointed out with my barrel. So I'm going to bring my reticle down, which is my impact up, until my reticle matches up on that axis. Okay, from there, I'm gonna go ahead and pop back down, look through the barrel, make sure that I haven't made any major movements. Still aiming at the exact same place. Good, okay, and looks like I need to bring my reticle left or impact right. Very good. You can do this on whatever preferred magnification you have. I prefer more magnification than less.
Okay.
Especially
because instinctually my mind would tell me, okay, maybe I want the least magnification to mirror what I'm seeing through the barrel, but what you're telling me is that actually it's not necessary.
Once you can make sure that you're aiming at the target, then at that point you can increase your magnification. Gotcha. Okay, so I'm looking pretty good. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and reassemble this rifle and load a mag up, and we'll send our first round down and see where we're at.
All right, we'll go to zero. All right, so now I'm getting ready to zero this rifle. And so for someone who they've done their boresighting and they're ready to zero at the range and they're by themselves, because usually you can do this with someone else and it'll make it easier. but for the most part, most people are gonna be by themselves. So when it comes to zeroing the rifle, what's your kind of first step, second step, next step when it comes to getting that zero done? And then just kind of talking them through exactly what needs to happen with each other.
Yeah, so the first thing that I'm gonna do is make sure that my rifle is nice and supported. Again, we're using the bipod for the front, rear bag for the rear. If you're laying prone, we wanna make sure to have a nice, good position behind the rifle, squared up. At that point, we want to, once we've made our initial adjustment on our windage and elevation, we're ready to take that first shot. I want to go ahead and load my gun, chamber around, and then start breathing. So as I'm breaking that shot, I'm pulling that trigger straight into the rear, taking as good of a shot as you can on that initial bore sight. If you pull a shot left or right, be honest with yourself, that's gonna help you in the zeroing process. But the first thing we're gonna do is identify the target, which is the center dot of that target we have downrange, and that's gonna be your initial aiming spot. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and lay one round down. Good. All right, go ahead and throw the gun back on safe. And so what we're gonna do now is we are going to reacquire our target back through our scope. If it's just you by yourself at the range, you're gonna use your reticle, whether it's an MOA or mil scale reticle, it's gonna give you some frame of reference as to what your next adjustment needs to be. So the next thing we're gonna do is locate our impact down on our target. And depending on the scope you have, depending on the magnification or the distance you're trying to zero at, or the caliber you're shooting, that could be easier or harder. Sometimes you do have to end up walking down range if you don't have enough magnification or if you don't have a spotting scope. So we just got to play that one by ear.
So because it's different, so like everybody's gonna have or could have different reticles, different setups.
Yep.
And so in terms of understanding what adjustments to make on the knob,
yep.
I kind of wing it, personally me, but then I kind of have a better understanding of what my clicks are doing, based on my reticle. I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this question because it's actually complicated.
Sure.
And that's the thing about zeroing a gun is there's really no way to make it dummy proof, right?
There's a lot of variables.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so, like for instance, now, if I'm just speaking plain language, I'd say just about an inch outside of my bullseye.
Okay.
And an inch below my bullseye and about an inch and a half to the right, or maybe about an inch to the right.
So yeah, so our scopes are adjusting, they're gonna be an MOA or mil, so that's an angular unit of measure. So in this case, we have the Mark V 3.6 to 18 with the PR2 mil reticle in it. And so what we're gonna do is just use that reticle and say, how many hash marks is it? How many hash marks is our impact away from our aiming spot on both horizontal and vertical axis? And we just take care of those one at a time.
Gotcha.
So what I'll do after my first shot, after I've identified it, I've got back behind my rifle, what I'm gonna go do is aim back at the same exact aiming spot that I had before and make sure my rifle is nice and stable. Again, we're gonna support the front, bipod, rear of the bag. And so when we make that initial adjustment, what we're gonna do is aim back at the same aiming spot that we were aiming at before and then focus on elevation or windage at a time, one at a time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do elevation and I'm going to raise my reticle or lower my reticle depending on where my impact is at, however many hash marks my reticle tells me.
Gotcha. So basically it's safe to say that before you go zero your rifle, you need to understand your reticle.
Yes.
And the best way is just Google it. Google it, get online and figure out and understand what type of reticle you have and what each hash mark is demonstrating to you so that you know how many clicks that you would need to make the adjustments.
Absolutely.
Because you could end up throwing 20 clicks in there and you don't move at all, or 10 clicks and you're off paper.
And depending on what unit of measure that is, whether it's MOA or mil or quarter minute per click or eighth minute per click, you need to know what your adjustments are in and what unit of measure your reticle is in. Those are today, MOA or mil. They're not as mixed as they once were at one point in time. So that makes it easier, but you do need to understand what the hash marks are in your reticle and what unit of measure your adjustments are.
Okay. And
we're gonna go ahead and aim back at the same spot we made, or same aiming spot.
We're doing elevation, right?
Yeah. So
I'm looking at.
So looking at your aiming spot where you're aiming before, you're gonna use your hash marks.
Now, before you finish watching this video, I want to quickly talk about the hearing protection that I'm wearing in this video. These are the AKT1 blackout wireless in-ear hearing protection with Bluetooth. I like to call them the AirPods for shooters. I say for shooters because AirPods don't protect your hearing, but these do. They are hands down my favorite in-ear hearing protection that I've ever used, and I mean ever. They have an NR 25 dB auto noise blocking. They can enhance your hearing by 6 times. They have advanced noise cancellation, Bluetooth connectivity with high fidelity speakers so you can take phone calls and listen to music. They have a battery life of 10 hours with an additional 30 hours in a charging case, and they're low profile and stylish enough to fit in not only at the gun range, but in your gym, while you're studying, working, at school, at home, you name it. I'm in love with these things, and now they're finally available on my store at shop.mrcolionnoir.com, or you can just click the link in the description section of this video.
On the vertical axis to count how many hash marks there are. And in the reticle, there's going to be numbers. And so if you're having trouble determining what each of those hash marks is, like I find the number 2, and then I break that down and find 1 mil. And then from there I can find a half mil. And from there I could find a quarter.
So I'm sitting at right now, elevation wise, quarter mil.
Quarter mil?
Quarter mil low.
So your impact is a quarter mil low. Okay. So we are going to come up on our elevation dial 3 clicks, 2 or 3 clicks, depending on whether that's favoring the 2 or 3 tenths. So go ahead and we're gonna go counterclockwise.
Okay. And so another thing too is understanding what you're adjusting when you're adjusting, right? So up is moving my impact up on this particular optic.
That's correct.
Right. Some optics, it's the inverse, right?
That's correct.
Whereas up means you're just moving the actual reticle.
So the direction indicated on the main tube is the direction that your impact will travel when you rotate the dial that way.
Gotcha.
If you're looking through your scope while you're making that adjustment, your reticle is going to do the inverse of that.
So here, raise my impact up, but when I look through if I'm looking through my reticle when I'm making adjustments, it's gonna actually move my reticle down.
That's correct.
All right.
Okay. And so now that you're nice and stable, you made that elevation adjustment. What you're gonna do is aim back at the same aiming spot you're aiming at before, and now we're gonna deal with your windage. So we're gonna use the reticle to determine how many clicks off and what direction you need to go.
Quarter.
What direction?
Quarter, I need to move it a quarter to the left.
Quarter to the left. Okay, so let's go ahead and remove that windage cap. We're gonna go look at the indicated direction of travel. And we're gonna make an adjustment 2 to 3 clicks. So you see, you need to bring your adjustment, you need to bring your impact what direction?
To the left.
To the left, okay. So here we got it on right there. It says to move your impact right, we're gonna rotate it that way. So we need to move it the opposite direction. So that will be clockwise. You said about a quarter mil, so between 2 and 3 tenths.
I'll keep it at 2.
Okay. All right, so at this point we have dealt with your first shot. We've made a correction off of that first shot for both your windage and elevation. At this point, your second shot, as long as you make a good shot and go through your fundamentals properly, there's no reason that impact shouldn't end up right smack dab in the center of where your aiming spot is. So let's go ahead and send another round and see what we got. Go ahead and see where that impact was.
All right. So I'm gonna move.
So before we make an adjustment, let's see, how far off do you think you were in what direction?
I was off. So basically I recreated the exact same first shot, but on the left side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're getting down into that like 1/10-ish kind of zone, let's go ahead and take a 5-shot group and
see whether,
and we'll make another refined adjustment if we need to after that 5-shot.
Gotcha.
All right, so what I would do typically right now is either get a spotting scope out or take as much time as I need to measure exactly how close my point of impact is to my point of aim. The larger of a sample you take while you're zeroing, the more refined you can make sure that zero is. Sometimes rifles, as we know, the first shot isn't always where every other shot is, so it's another consideration as your barrel heats up when you're sighting it in. That point of impact may change depending on the type of system you're shooting. So after you think you've got your rifle zeroed and you want it where you want it, we go ahead and reset our elevation and windage dials back to zero. And then I would go ahead and confirm, once the gun is cooled down all the way, I'd go ahead and confirm that point of aim and point of impact is still perfect on a cold gun after you get done.
I made my adjustments. I'm good with that zero.
Good.
Personally, I think at this point where I'm at a point where it's any deviation is going to be me.
Absolutely. And once we've determined that the zero is as good as it can get and as you're confident in it, we're going to go ahead and zip our dials back to zero and put our windage cap back on.
In this case, that's unscrewing this cap.
Yep.
Then it basically become a free float and then putting it on zero.
Yep. So on Mark 5, it's as simple as loosening the 2 set screws, rotating the dial back to zero until it clicks and locks in place, tightening it back down. Now your elevation dial is zeroed out. We're gonna do the same thing for the windage here. And then we'll just go ahead and, we'll lose our mag, rack the round out of the chamber, and we'll be good. On hot days like this too, it may be advantageous for you to get off the ground. If you have an opportunity to shoot off of a bench, kind of get away from that mirage a little bit, it's definitely gonna be in your favor.
I definitely noticed a mirage on the gun. And so it kind of made it harder to see exactly where I was hitting, but I was able to see through it.
If you're shooting suppressed or, there's a lot of different factors that will increase mirage and either make you need to take time or take a second and just kind of slow it down a bit. So
sounds good to me.
One thing's for certain and 2 things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you. And we're all fighting this culture war together. Now you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together we can stop the suppression of our 2A rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.